Thinking for yourself is the thing on which everything else depends. This is a quote from Nancy Klein, author of Time to Think. And really that's what this video is going to be all about, is helping people to think for themselves. In this video, I'll talk about coaching and how managers or leaders can incorporate coaching tools into their toolkit and use it as part of their management style. By the end of this video, I'm sure you will have more confidence in introducing coaching techniques into your skills and become a better manager or leader because of it. Hi, I'm Carol Mould. For more advice and tips on leadership, soft skill, and how to live your best life, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and stay tuned to watch new videos that I release every Tuesday. With my background in organizational psychology and project management, my YouTube channel focuses on the intersection between these areas, namely soft skills and leadership skills. In the face of rapid disruptive change, managers can't be expected to have all the answers anymore, and a command and control leadership style is no longer viable. As a result, many firms are moving towards a coaching approach in which managers facilitate problem solving and encourage employees' development by asking questions and offering support and guidance rather than giving orders and making all the decisions. Let's explore what coaching is all about. First of all, coaching is a thinking partnership. It facilitates turning potential into performance and helps your team members to achieve their goals. Coaching addresses your inner world, the thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and perceptions which lead to fulfillment, and your outer world, the actions and behaviors which determine your effectiveness. The coaching process enables clients or team members or colleagues to define clear goals. It helps them to identify and eliminate anything that's blocking their progress, and also helps them to be clear on their goals and to align their actions with their goals. The overall goals of coaching are to raise awareness, becoming more self-aware in order to be self-correcting and self-generating. It's also to develop observable competencies for the person being coached to take responsibility for where they want to be and to bring about some sort of change. There are different types of coaching. There are business coaches who work with clients on developing vision, leadership skills, and building a more profitable and efficient business. Executive coaches work with upper-level executives and owners of companies who desire to accomplish either corporate or personal goals more effectively and efficiently. Then we also have life coaches who work with individuals on making their personal life and their business life more balanced, successful, and satisfying. What we're talking about today is managers as coaches. So not being a professional coach, but incorporating coaching principles and practices into the way that you do your job as a manager. So this is the coaching we're talking about, the kind that creates a true learning organization. It's ongoing and executed by managers inside that organization. It's work that all managers should engage in with all of their people, all of the time, and has an influence on the organization's culture and achieving its mission. An effective manager as coach asks questions instead of providing answers. They support employees instead of judging them and facilitate their development instead of telling them what to do. So what is the coach's role? First of all, the coach needs to ask questions. This helps the team member to identify new ways of thinking and explore new approaches and options. They also need to create a safe space that encourages exploration and openness. They need to communicate openly and reflect observations back to the person that they are coaching. They need to hold the focus of the session. So it's the coach that manages the process, whereas the person being coached owns the content of what they come up with during the session. It's important that a coach is non-judgmental, non-directive, and respectful of the client's process. And this can be quite challenging for managers just starting out to incorporate a coaching approach into their style if they might be used to telling their people what to do. Non-judgmental will be using phrases such as, "What do you think would happen if you did that?" instead of, "That's a crazy idea." Non-directive is asking, what ideas have you had so far and how well do you think each one of those would work, rather than, I think you should do it this way. And respecting the client or the coachee's process is to believe that they are capable of coming up with their own solutions. And in fact, they'll probably come up with better solutions than what you will, because they know themselves and their background and their abilities, and they'll be more committed to following through with ideas that they've come up with themselves. Lastly, the coach would use coaching tools, techniques, and concepts as appropriate. One of the tools would be to think of a particular coaching model. And the one that I've chosen to talk about in this video is called the GROW model. It's very useful to use a model or framework to guide your coaching, particularly when you're new to it. Many experienced coaches still use a framework to guide their process. A clear framework gives you direction and helps you to make the best use of the time available. There are a lot of frameworks available, but perhaps the best known and most widely used model is the GROW model that we're talking about today. It's straightforward and easy to remember and explain. It's up to you as a manager whether you just keep the model in mind for yourself or if you bring it out and be explicit and share it with your team. My personal preference is to share it so that it demystifies the process and sets the tone that you and the person that you're coaching share responsibility for the session. I'll step you through the model in this video, and I'll also post links in the description below to further books that you could read if you'd like to go deeper into this model. So GROW is an acronym. The G stands for goal, R for reality, O is for options, and the W is for what will you do. Let's step through each of these stages, see what they're all about, and have a look at some examples of questions and styles you can use in each stage. Let's start with looking at G for goal. So when you get together as the manager with your team member, work out together what the team member wants to achieve during the session. It may well start out that the team member chooses a broad or more bigger picture goal, such as something they want to achieve in the next 3 to 6 months or in the next year. And that's fine to set the scene and to set some context, but if the goal does start out broadly, guide the process to narrow it down to something achievable within the session. Make sure that the team member takes responsibility for the content of the goal. As the goal, you can help to make sure that that goal is specific and realistic to achieve within the session, but don't guide them as to what their goal should be. Keep notes of the bigger picture goals for future reference to make sure that in future sessions that big picture is still kept in mind. Let's have a look at some example questions that you could use to help your team member during this stage of the model. You could start out quite broadly, say something like, how can I help you today? What would you like to work on in this session? When you leave the session today, what would make you feel that it had been a really worthwhile session? What are you hoping to achieve by the end of the session? So these are some useful questions, some example questions that you can use at this stage. You don't have to use all of them, you don't have to use any of them, but it's useful to have a variety of questions at your disposal so that you don't become repetitive and sound pedantic. We don't want coaching sessions to sound like a role play. It's got to be authentic, and so by all means change the words of these questions to something authentic that would feel natural for you to say. The next stage is the reality stage. In this stage, as the manager, as coach, aim to understand what's going on for your colleague. Ask open, exploratory questions and listen reflectively. Paraphrase and summarize what they're saying to ensure that you understand it fully and to help them understand it fully. But don't be annoying. Don't paraphrase when the situation doesn't lend itself to you doing that. And don't summarize if they just said one sentence. So you need to play it by ear and make it natural, but do make sure that you're focusing on understanding what the current situation is. The content of the stage might focus on events or more on the emotions that your colleague has experienced related to those events. Your job as the coach is to guide the process, keeping the session goal in mind from the previous step. Let this part of the session go on as long as you feel it's useful and productive to understand the current situation. If the conversation starts to go off on a tangent, you could remind your colleague of the goal of the session and validate whether the goal is still applicable. Sometimes the exploration stage illustrates that the original goal was not the best focus for the situation at hand, and perhaps you will agree together if the goal for the session should change. If not, then bring the session back on track to the original goal and keep going. Some example questions that you could ask during the reality stage. Again, just a broad question, what is going on at the moment? Perhaps what is your concern about the situation? How would you prefer the situation to be? That sounds like a difficult conversation that you had. How are you feeling? What resources do you need? What resources do you already have? So really just focusing on the current situation. If at this stage the coachee starts coming up with solutions, What you could do is have a sort of parking lot. Make a note of things that come up and say, that's a great suggestion. Let's make a note of that and we'll come back to it when we get to that part of the session. You want to try and keep each session focused on that stage of the model. Then we look at O for options. This is when we start to look ahead to the options that are available to your colleague. Refrain from offering your own suggestions as far as possible. As I mentioned earlier, your colleagues' suggestions are likely to be better than yours because they know their own situation, background, personality, emotions, and so on much better than you do. And they're much more likely to implement ideas that they've come up with themselves rather than if you came up with the ideas. And you want to respect their ability to come up with great suggestions. So you can help your colleague to generate broad creative options together. If they're totally stuck, then you could perhaps tentatively put forward ideas to help them continue thinking, but don't take over ownership of the content of the session. A really powerful question in this stage of the model is to ask, what else? So they might come up with a few ideas and then really challenge them to say, what else could you do? And sometimes it's only after asking that question that the really good, rich solutions start to surface. Another tool you can use here is to be comfortable with silence. Don't feel the need to rescue the person and jump in and give them suggestions. If you're silent and comfortable with that silence, that often gives the person time to think and come up with something more creative. Your job is to help them analyze the options once they've come up with them and evaluate how realistic and desirable they are. So the example questions that we would look at in this stage, you could think of in two parts. You first want to allow the person to generate options without judging any of them. And then secondly, once you've got a lot of options, a great number based on research is to come up with 6 options. Only then do you want to start evaluating them. So in the generating options part, you could say, what options have you thought about so far? Again, what else could you do? Any more ideas? Another way of asking that question. What strategies have you tried in the past? Have you noticed strategies that others use effectively in similar circumstances? So really just helping them to think through what options are available to them. Once you've helped your colleague to generate options, now's the time to help them evaluate the options. Some example questions here. How would you like to evaluate the options? Are there any that you would like to eliminate straight away? Shall we look at the pros and cons of the remaining options? What are your head and heart saying to you? The fourth stage of the model is the what. Some people refer to this as the way forward. This stage is to enable your colleague to identify specific steps that they can take towards achieving their goals. Coaching is really about change and movement, and having a specific plan can help to motivate your colleague to take the agreed action. Make sure that the actions are owned by the colleague. Your job is to help them make sure that the actions are specific to the goal and challenging yet realistic. If the actions are too easy, it won't achieve much, too hard, and they might be setting themselves up for failure. Example questions you can ask in this fourth stage. You could sum up by saying, so we've talked about several ideas. What will you actually do? What do you think is the most effective way to achieve this? How realistic is this for you? You also want to ask them what is a suitable time frame, because if it doesn't have a time frame, it's less likely to be done. You also want to explore with your colleague what obstacles might be in their way and to see if they need any further support to overcome those obstacles. Also ask them how will they get that support, bearing in mind it might be you that needs to provide that support as their manager. It's also very useful to ask them something along the lines of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to taking that action that you've suggested? And if the number is fairly low, you could ask them, what could you do to raise your commitment closer to a 10? Some final thoughts on the GROW model. It's effectively simple. It's easy to learn yourself, it's easy to remember, and it's easy to share with your colleagues and help them to remember it as well. It can be used in a wide range of contexts, and even though it's simple, you can still explore situations to a significant depth and get real value out of a session. Something I'd like to challenge you to do as a leader is to consider your leadership skills. Please watch my other videos on leadership skills. I'll put links to them in the description below. And if you'd like to chat to me about individual coaching sessions for you or your team, please contact me to discuss options. Think about if there are any of these leadership skills that you feel you need to develop further, and perhaps you would like someone to coach you. So the question is, what will you do after watching this video? I hope you now have a better understanding of coaching principles and specifically the GROW model of coaching. Please watch my other videos in the leadership series, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoyed watching it, and hit the bell to be notified when I release a new video every Tuesday. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.